on the server. Welcome. Today is November 20th, 2020. This is QM222 Quantitative Methods here at beautiful Boston University. And while I was really excited on Wednesday, we had 8 people who showed up in class. Today, I'm only looking at 5. I don't know what's going on. And the COVID numbers for BU look pretty good. Last night, there were only 3 people who were sent off to quarantine. Instead of a couple of days ago when there was, 9, and the last week there was 15. Anyways, nice to see all of you. Please, all of you stay safe and healthy over the Thanksgiving holiday. Before we begin, Sam asked me a few questions, and Sam asked a great question. Sam's sitting in front of me in class. He said, I remember this lecture where you said if a variable is not statistically significant, not important, delete it and rerun the regression again. Is that what you mean in question part D, was it? Part D, which says, create your own variables. The idea of putting a variable into a regression is twofold. Does it have statistical explanatory power, and does it have explanatory power to your audience? Please forgive me, Sam, for repeating pretty much word for word 5 minutes ago. I do a lot of research, and I look for variables that are statistically significant, that have actual real power in explaining why some people are rich and other people are poor. One of the most important variables I've ever found is being married, staying married. If you're looking for 10 seconds of personal wealth advice, the number one thing I can tell you is get married and stay married for a very, very long time and never get divorced. The worst thing for destroying your personal wealth is getting divorced. However, if you do need to get divorced as fast as possible, i.e. you get married at say 25, get divorced at 26. That's going to destroy your wealth the least, all right? But in general, the people who have the most wealth are married families, all right? Gender is not important. Staying married for a long time is important for a couple of reasons. Number one, it is cheaper for 2 people to live together than 1. You're not doing 2 apartment rentals. You're not doing 2 separate cars. You're not having 2 electric bills. You're not doing 2 cell phone, well, you're probably doing 2 cell phone bills. Probably doesn't change very much, okay? But 2 can live a lot cheaper than 1. There's economies of scale, is the fancy economic term. The second thing is there tends to be an incentive effect. If I am married, I tend to work harder and earn more money than if I'm just happen to be single. Personal 30-second story. I was not married. I had a job. I wanted to switch careers. So what did I do? I didn't switch careers. I took off for 9 months and wandered around the world with a backpack. It was great. If I was married and wanted to switch careers, I wouldn't have taken 9 months off to go wander around the world. I would have kept working for those 9 months until I made the career switch. All right? So being married has incentive effects for earning money. Anyways, marriage is a very strong variable, both statistically significant and explanatory wise. A variable that is not statistically particularly significant or explanatory wise is gender, being male or female. Men and women, after you adjust for age, education, marital status, and a bunch of other factors, whether they're working or not, basically have roughly the same amount of wealth. In general, when you look at a married couple or an unmarried couple, women tend to have a little less wealth than men, but that's primarily because women, up till now, have had less education and less opportunities in the labor force. But when you take into account all those kind of things, men and women have roughly the same kinds of coefficient. The coefficient on gender tends to be very low and oftentimes statistically insignificant. But I leave that into the regression. Why do I leave that in the regression? Because it has explanatory power for the audience. The audience says, is there a difference between men and women? And I'm like, nah, look at it. So sometimes you leave variables in a regression that have no explanatory statistical power, but they answer a question. Does that make sense? So how do you run these regressions? If a variable does not have any statistical power, what you do is you put all of them in there and you say, look, this variable, look at that number, it doesn't have statistical power. Or for example, lefty and righty. I don't know what the answer is. Actually, I do, I'm lying too, but sorry about that. I don't know if being lefty or righty has any impact on wages, but if you're interested in that, don't just say left-handed or right-handed has or doesn't have, show it in the regression. Talk about the coefficient, talk about the t-statistic, talk about the standard errors, and then you can say, okay, the final regression may or may not have lefty or righty in it. Does that make sense? So you show all the stuff, you show, and then you say, okay, I don't know if you remember that there was columns of regressions last time. I showed you to create a table, and there was column 1, regression 1, column 2, regression 2, column 3. So if you believe that your penultimate regression is number 5, then you can have lots of variables in columns 4 and 3 and 4, and you say, okay, column 5 is the one I really think is the best regression to explain. I throw away the variables I don't care about or aren't really important for explaining to the audience. Am I being clear to people on Zoom? Am I being clear to people in class? Sometimes, let me summarize. Sometimes you leave variables in a regression that are not statistically significant if your audience is going to ask you about it. How's that? Sometimes you just leave them in there. It's perfectly okay to show me variables that are not statistically significant if you explain what you're trying to do and why. Other questions about project part B, which is due not Wednesday, but the following Wednesday. And there's a homework, I think it's homework number 5 due this weekend. Yeah, okay. Should we start today's lecture? Today's lecture is all about interaction terms. Let me jump to the class website. And what we're doing is, I think it's lecture 20 is the number. Nope, 21. Lecture 21, interaction terms. Rashant, you're still looking at me, so tell me if you can see interaction terms, different slopes for different folks.
Do you mean the PowerPoint slides, Professor? Because I can't see any up.
Say again?
I can't see the PowerPoint slides.
All right, thank you. That's why I'm asking. Can you see the PowerPoint slides now?
It just began share. Yeah, I can see it.
All right, time lapse. So we're going to talk about, and let me just show you the slide, and then we'll come back and do it. Slide 13 is the slide for the whole idea. Whenever we have a dummy variable, a 0-1 variable, such as male, female, or winter or spring or something like that, what are we doing? We're estimating a different intercept on the y-axis. So if we have a dummy variable and that's it, we're estimating 2 parallel lines with different y-intercepts. But sometimes we don't want just to think about a different y-intercept. Sometimes we want a different slope, because sometimes things vary depending on what's going on. What would be an example of a different slope? Instead of budget here and revenue, let's put age and let's put salary. There are some fields where you get very high increases in salary as you get older, and other fields where salary stays pretty much flat or level. An example, a flat or level, I don't know if you can see my cursor going across, a flat or level as you get older would be social services. If you go to the School of Social Work here at Boston University and get a degree in social work, and you go into the social work field, whatever your starting salary is, 10 years from now, you'll pretty much have slightly more, but very tiny bit. And that slightly more will probably just be inflation. Social workers do not get raises as they get older. Instead, they just get burnt out. Oh, sorry. So social workers, pretty flat. If you go into iBanking, investment banking, Wall Street, doesn't have to be actually Wall Street, but I think you get the idea. You go into one of these things. Investment bankers, you walk in, your first day on the job, you're like, I'm being paid sub-minimum wage for the number of hours I'm here. And as you age, as you stay into investment banking, your salary goes up, up, up rather dramatically. Investment bankers who've been there like 10 years are earning millions, who are doing well. I mean, that's why so many people from business schools, so many undergraduates want to go to places like, you know, JP Morgan, right? Or one of the other big investment banking firms, because you start off as a wage slave, barely earning anything to survive, and then boom, your salary just goes straight up, very high slope. So depending on your major here at Boston University, you can either have a steep slope like investment banking or a very shallow slope like social work. Does that make sense? So what we're going to do today is going to do something called interaction terms, which allow things to vary. Let me ask you a very straightforward question. Why do people not like learning in the learn from anywhere environment compared to what was last year, just the regular classroom environment? Why do people not like LFA so much? We're skipping COVID. We're just saying in general, why don't we offer LFA for the next 20 years?
From our perspective?
Yeah, from your perspective. Okay, cost the same as in-person classes, right? And you're here, you're in person. There's not really that much difference except for you're wearing a mask and I actually have no idea who you are. Who are you?
Caitlin.
Oh, Caitlin. Oh, hi. We've met many times.
Yes.
Sorry.
I have different colored hair like every week.
Okay, different colored hair and a totally different mask. But normally I'd be like, oh, hi, Caitlin. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. We'd be chatting away. Okay. So beyond my not recognizing, oh, you have glasses too. Okay. This is embarrassing, especially on tape. Okay. So Caitlin, it costs the same, but you personally are getting pretty much the same. I've seen you're here, I'm going to say about 3/4 of the time. Yeah. So you're getting the in-person experience, but you still don't feel good about it. So why, Caitlin's shaking her head now, she still doesn't feel good about it. What's missing? I'm here, you're here, okay, normally you might be sitting a row closer, okay, or 2 rows closer.
Interpersonal connection.
Yes. What she just said was the interpersonal connections. And that's really what this lecture is all about. Interaction. What's missing in the LFA is, yes, I'm giving the same stories, the same lectures. Sam, I just already said to Sam, Sam, this is my standard lines. I'm going to tell you about wealth and women and men and things like that. Same kind of things, but we're not having these interactions. And because there's not interactions, we're losing something. So interactions are really important in life, and they're also really important in learning. And we're going to figure out how to do interaction terms in regressions so we can actually model how much are we losing for LFA environment? How much of the interactions work? Thanks. You're perfect. Please do 100% class contribution. So the next few slides are not mine. I don't know why a professor put them in here because they have absolutely no relevance to a 19 or 20-year-old or a 21-year-old, but let's just go with it anyways. All right. You have to give a sick baby Tylenol or aspirin or some kind of painkiller. So obviously the professor who wrote these next 3 slides and gave them to me just had a small child. Okay. What kind of tool do you use? There is the dosing cup, which is, I don't know, most of you have seen this little cup. There's the oral syringe, which sort of looks like a needle, except it doesn't have the needle on the end. You sort of squirt it in. It reminds me of turkey basters, except it's smaller for a baby. And then they have the little dosing spoons and the medicine dropper. So you've seen most of these kind of things? Yes, no, maybe? Great. Does it matter if you have to give like Tylenol or some type of liquid aspirin, acetaminophen, Advil? And this picture shows there is a big interaction between parents making a mistake and which particular style they use. So on the vertical axis, we have the percent of parents making an error, messing up, giving the kid too much or too little. And this is a small amount of medicine, this is a medium amount of medicine, and this is a large amount of medicine. And what they see is, for giving small amounts of medicine, parents, 73.4, call it 3/4 of all parents, mess up when told by a doctor to give a small amount of medicine and they use this cup. 3/4 just get it wrong. Syringes, and there's 2 types of syringes. There's this syringe and there's this syringe. These 2 syringes, very few parents get it wrong. Only about 1/5 to 1/4, 23.9 and 22.1. So parents trying to do their best. They've got a screaming kid there. And why do parents mess up on small dosages? Because when is the kid screaming? Usually at 2 in the morning. So you walk into the bathroom, you're bleary-eyed, you're like, right? And you just can't get the right amount. And you're like, that's fine, okay, great. And give it to the kid. With one of these things, you're still just as bleary-eyed, but it's just easier to be precise at 2 in the morning when you can't really think. For medium amounts, 1/3 of all parents mess up with the cup, and only about 6 or 7% mess up with the syringe. And for very large amounts, 7.5 milliliters, parents don't mess up at all, because when you're bleary-eyed at 2 in the morning, you can actually see 7.5 ounces, basically fill the whole cup up. And almost anyone can fill a whole cup up. I don't know if that makes sense. Whether you're awake or not awake, it's just fill the cup. Great, I can fill the cup. But you're trying to fill only 1/4 of the cup or 1/3 of a cup, that's really hard to do at 2 a.m. So pretty much the same amount. What does that say? There's an interaction between the size of the dose and the type of delivery mechanism. There's an interaction between cups and syringes versus small, medium, and large. So the idea of interaction terms is they allow you to look at X and Y and say they differ by some characteristic of the observation. And there's 3 examples here, and I'm going to send you, while I'm talking, think about it, because I'm going to send you off into breakout rooms and ask, can you think of any interactions in your own life? Any place where an interaction is really important? So effective oil prices on a country's performance, whether the country exports oil or natural gas or imports oil and natural gas. So you can think of, for example, Saudi Arabia. When oil prices go up, Saudi Arabia does really well, but Japan, which is a net importer of oil, doesn't do economically as well. Marriage, positively correlated with wages for males, but negatively for females. So this is that sort of marriage effect, causes people to work harder. Men, when they get married, tend to sort of buckle down and actually do, get higher wages and higher promotions. Females tend to get lower wages, and people still argue about why. Okay, so I'm going to send you off into breakout rooms for a couple of minutes. And can you come back with some examples of interaction terms? I've created 7 rooms. Please remember what room you're in. So I can say, okay, room 1 or room 5. And it's 10:28. We'll see you in about 4 minutes. I don't know if you know Davis Carpenter.
I do.
Yeah.
So Davis was like, I didn't know Rithvik was from TA. I was like, how did you know that? He was like, oh, I was watching the video and you were chatting with him when I was just in the breakout room. So whatever we say right now is being recorded. You staying here, you're going back to Connecticut.
Probably going back to Connecticut for the.
Right, so that means I'm not going to see you until you've been cleared.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't live on campus. I don't know how the rules work for that, but just getting tested.
Yeah, I still think you need 3 tests.
3 tests.
For sure, even if you live off campus, you need 3 tests before I can see you again. And the 3 tests have to be done over at least a 7-day period. So you can't do 3 in a row. You have to do it every other day.
Yeah, you do. I have a job here, like on campus, and I was going back. But I can't go into work when I come back. I have to stay home for the week and do remote until I get all my tests back.
There's like no cases back like where I live. Like,
Yeah, but with these, I think CT is still like high risk.
CT is high risk.
Yeah,
There's
it's like
nothing going on.
you have to fill out like that, like whole Massachusetts travel or anything. Because New Jersey was in the clear for a while, but now it's not.
Well, I'm staying in Brookline, so the Brookline, which is it's a 28-minute walk. Okay, they shut Brookline down, they're shutting BU down, so I think I'm in the clear. All right, we'll close the room since it seems pretty clear that people here have done talking. For those of you watching on tape, the breakout rooms will close in about 55 seconds. So, Abdullah, I haven't seen you in a while. I'm talking visually. So, Abdullah, you want to go first?
Nice, Professor. Nice to see you as well. Thank you. So we were like, it was me and Kate and Christopher and Max. We
Yeah,
said traffic. So if there is a lot of traffic, then we would not use Uber. But if there is,
interaction between traffic and the style of transportation. And I would agree with you. Before COVID, Abdullah, if there was huge amounts of traffic, I'd hop on the T. But if there wasn't huge amounts of traffic, I'd be like, to get on the T, what are you, crazy? No way. Because sometimes the T, because it goes underground, is always faster. Being sitting in an Uber stuck in traffic is no fun, or in a taxi or anything else. Great job, Abdullah. Please give Abdullah full credit for today. Room 2, Alana, Miriam, Dakan, and Prishant, Priyanshi. Forgive me, Priyanshi.
Yeah. So we spoke about how during the summer, the sales for Ben & Jerry ice creams would go up. However, in the winter, it would go down because of the season change.
Oh, interaction between weather and people's desire to eat ice cream. There actually was a statistic, I'm not sure I believe it, but it was published numerous times, that New England is the only place in the world where ice cream sales actually go up in the winter. A lot of people have heard this, but I've never seen the actual raw data. And until I see raw data, I don't necessarily believe it. Room 3, Ashley, Gunsha, the moderator, I guess that's me. Filippo, Isabel, and Kenzie.
So we were talking about how gas prices change depending on what's going on in the country. So like at the beginning of coronavirus, gas was really, really cheap because nobody was really going anywhere.
Nobody was going anywhere. Gas is back.
And yeah, and then like on the East Coast when like Hurricane Sandy happened, gas prices were really, really high.
Excellent example. Excellent example. All right, room 5. Annika, Joel, Junchen, Kevin, and Rishant.
Professor, I was thinking about when the economy is doing well in a country, consumer confidence in terms of spending is high, but when there's like economic recession, consumer confidence in spending is low.
That's pretty good. Excellent. Room 6, Ishani, Kira, Leiyan, and Sung Woo.
So we talked about something similar to the other group. We talked about how turkey sales will probably be very high in this coming week, but like all other weeks during the year, they're probably much lower. So depending on like the celebration.
That's an interesting question. Everybody, do we think turkey sales are going to be higher or lower this year? So the absolute number of turkeys are probably going to be higher because there's going to be more separated Thanksgiving. For example, my family usually is about 40 or 50 people who show up at Thanksgiving and they get one giant turkey, all right? But because of COVID, our family is having like 5 different family gatherings of like 6 to 7 people each instead of one giant of 40 or 50 people. So the number of turkeys being sold, but what about total volume? You think more people are going to eat turkey or less because of COVID? By the way, I have no idea what the answer is. I mean, we'll find out like 2 months later, in end of December. So there was one thumbs down. Jacob, you were sort of giving me a.
Yeah, I think there will be more turkeys, but I think it's like as you said.
All right, so Jacob thinks everyone's just going to buy a large turkey because they can't remember that only 10 people are showing up instead of 50 are showing up, so everyone's going to overbuy. Interesting. All right, room 7. Iris, Elizabeth, Isabel, Jason, Carvey, and is there anybody else? Can you scroll down for a minute? Nope, that's it for room 7.
Yeah, so Professor, we were thinking that, or at least my example was, when I was younger, my parents would tell me to drink a lot of milk to grow, and like that would have an effect on my growth. And
right?
Sorry?
Pretty small, so it must have worked.
But in terms of like male versus female, you can both tell them to drink X amount of milk, but biologically the male will grow much taller than the female.
Doesn't sound fair, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Let me just say, Isabel's been coming pretty much regularly in person. I have no idea what she looks like till this very moment.
Yeah, usually it's a mask on.
Yeah, usually I have a mask on. So let me just say, if next semester you walk by me, or next year you walk by me and say hi, and I have this blank stare, until this second I have no idea what what you look like.
I'll say hi. Don't worry.
When I look at you and go, who are you? You're like, he doesn't even remember me. All right. So what I want to do today, thank you very much for letting me know what you look like, Isabel. What I want to do right now is share my screen and download the file on our class website. And the file we need is under data files. And it's called, shockingly, interactionterms.xlsx. So I'm going to open up this Excel file, enable editing.